Monday, October 31st, 2022, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We're going to touch upon a subject that I've touched upon many times over the years, but as we get a lot of new subscribers, I think it's important. And the subject is fiat currencies and the fact that they're all sinking. Before I start, though, I like to say that this video is sponsored by my affiliates in the precious metals camp. We've got Miles Franklin in the US, North America, and ITM Trading. And we've got Gold Investments in the UK. All the details are below in the description. And most of you understand why I am affiliated to these precious metals dealers. Well, it's because I've been talking to you over the years about gold and silver, how gold and silver have been a good store of value and savings for me. And a lot of you have asked, where can I get gold? And the other thing I say to everyone, don't just use my affiliates because they're my affiliates. Do your homework, shop around. Find the most reputable dealer that you think is out there and try to get the best premium, but make sure that if you get a good premium from another dealer that's not affiliated with me, that they're going to deliver it quite promptly. So there are all these things. That's what I'm trying to say here. And talking about sponsors, today I want to talk a little bit about myself before we go on to the subject of fiat currencies. Of course, we get new followers every day, and I haven't spoken about myself for a while because I get a lot of complaints about this is becoming too commercialized. You've got all the sponsors, you're doing paid promotions, and maybe if I talk to you a little bit about my past and what I've been through, you might understand what's going on this channel. So we'll go back to the beginning of my professional career. I started out in Switzerland at a small private bank or fund manager back in late 1989. I worked there for about 3 years, moved to London in 1992 to work in the bond markets, government bond markets, and eventually moved towards financial futures, which is government bonds, but in the futures market. And I worked for 20 years for major brokers, major banks like Citibank, ABN AMRO, MF Global. But in 2012, the last firm I worked for, Mint Equities, and they're owned by Cantor Fitzgerald or BGC Partners. They closed the desk that I was working on, and so I lost my job after 20 years being in the city. I was okay financially. My wife and I, we had a relatively small mortgage. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what did I do once I lost my job? Well, one of my biggest clients and my wife said, "Oh, you have to register with the unemployment, national insurance, get your unemployment benefit." And I thought to myself, I will never do that. I never want to be dependent on the government. But they said, "Mario, you've paid into it. You're you're eligible for it." So I begrudgingly did that. And at the same time, I was sending hundreds of CVs online, trying to think of what I was going to do. I was 48 at the time. And yeah, I got a few interviews. Most of them went really well, but I was always told, "Oh, you're too experienced for this position," and so it never really led to anything. And so I thought of starting a business, dipping to my savings. And most of you probably know that my savings are in gold and silver, so I had to dip into that. So there are times when you need to do that. And that was one time. It wasn't the whole savings. And I bought into a franchise, a pawnbroking franchise. And I learned a lot. It was a pretty long process. I had to train. I had to find a shop. I had to refurbish the shop. And the business wasn't bad, but it was just not making money. And I was doing everything on my own. I couldn't hire anyone because the costs ended up being a lot higher than I thought. Things like business rates. So by 2014, and the business I started was November 2012. By the middle of 2014, my wife and I found a loophole in the contract, and we said we want out of this franchise. And of course, to run a franchise in a business, we opened a limited company. We had to have accountants. We had to liquidate it. It was a pretty stressful process. And by the autumn of 2014, everything had been, liquidated. It was a relief because it was very stressful for the whole family. And actually, I got in contact with an old colleague from MF Global, Italian guy, and went for quite a few interviews with him. He was running a desk in the city, and he actually promised me the job, not in writing, of course, but orally. And then it took a while. He said, "Oh, by Christmas we can sign the contract." And unfortunately, I never heard back from him. So I was stuck and didn't know what to do. I was sending CVs again to try to get back into the city, into the financial sector. Yes, I got a few interviews again. They really went well. But again, there's always that, "Oh, you're too experienced." So no one wanted to hire me. And believe me, I sent a lot of CVs online, hundreds, and you'd get maybe 2 or 3 interviews. So by 2015, my wife and I had to make a decision because we still had a mortgage. It wasn't a big mortgage. It was less than 10% of the value of the house, but we didn't have an income coming in, so we had to sell our house. That was stressful. We moved into a house, this house here, that's a bit smaller than our old house, but it wasn't in such a nice area, so we were able to pay off our mortgage and have money left over to redo the house. Needed a lot of work. And I also had some money left to buy some more gold and silver that I had sold in 2012. And I kept trying, sending CV out, and nothing. So I actually did odd jobs because my father always told me that it's better to do any kind of job than be dependent on the government. And my dad started from nothing. He did very well. And he gave me a poem when I turned 18, If, by Rudyard Kipling. And I recommend you read that poem. And it's one of the poems that kept me going. And why is that? Well, because it says there, if you lose everything, you just don't complain, keep going, do whatever you need to do to keep going. And yes, I took odd jobs. I haven't told you, even the old subscribers, this before. I even tried to drive an Uber, and that was horrible for a couple of months or 3 months. I had to take an odd job at a shop near where I live for a few hours a week to get some cash. My wife took odd jobs. And at the same time, I started the channel in late 2015. And I had no idea the channel will grow as much as this. I was just trying it out. And the main purpose of my channel was was to focus on what I knew. And what I knew is markets, economics, precious metals. And the way I've run my channel is to try to talk to the general public, be they inexperienced investors, be they hedge fund managers, or I have all kinds of viewers. Talk to them like I used to talk to my clients in the city, and my clients were institutional investors, and to try to explain how things work, and always with the contrarian or alternative Austrian School of Economics view that you should be self-reliant, independent, and not depend on government. And the same thing goes for the economy, right? Small government. So that's where I've been, and it hasn't been easy for the last 6 years. Of course, it's picked up a lot, my channel, since the beginning of 2020, even a little before the COVID crisis. It started to pick up, and I was able to stop doing that odd job I told you about. My wife hasn't had to, she's helped me a lot, but she hasn't had to do odd jobs anymore, and things have picked up. And I don't see anything wrong with trying to monetize some of the popularity of this channel. And there's a lot of you out there who begrudge when I do a sponsored video or a paid promotion. And a lot of you, some of you say, oh, you're like shilling gold and silver, but I'm not. I've always been a proponent of gold and silver ever since I first bought some gold in 2002. And I just tell people what I think about it, and how interesting gold and silver are, and how important they've been for thousands of years. And I let people decide for themselves. So, hopefully that will explain to you what we've been through. And yes, I've had my economic collapse, and I would say the bottom was 2014. And that's why I tell people it's not the end of the world. You just have to keep going. And what I'm proud of is that I didn't get help from government or family or extended family or anyone or a friend. My wife and I have been able to get out of this hole on our own. And that's it for that's all I have to say about that. So the topic today, of course, is fiat currencies and how they're all sinking. Before we go into that, though, just a few quick important news, I think. The first one is the election in Brazil, which is where I'm originally from. I was born and I grew up in Brazil until the mid-'80s, and I haven't lived there since then. But I see that Lula, the leftist former president, won by a very narrow margin, 50.9% to 49.1%. And I spoke to one of my cousins in Brazil yesterday, and he's a property developer in the south of Brazil. And he told me, yeah, Brazil is very divided. And just a little bit on Petrobras. Some of you and me personally have bought some Petrobras ADRs, PBR ADR, which is the Brazilian oil company. How's this going to affect Petrobras? Well, I don't know. It's very uncertain. Am I going to sell my ADRs or my shares? No, because it's got a very good dividend. I think it's over 30% dividend. And Petrobras is like an institution in Brazil. Yes, it is partly state-owned. I understand that. But there's the old fable, Aesop's fable, the goose that laid the golden eggs, right? And the story is in which a married couple owned a goose that lays one golden egg every day. For greed, they decided to kill the goose to obtain all the gold they supposed to be inside. Once opened, the goose proves to be like any normal goose inside. So I think that's what Petrobras is for Brazil. And I don't think Lula and I could be wrong, but I don't think he will kill the goose that lays the golden egg for Brazil, or golden eggs. And I see Petrobras as that. So my cousin said, well, Petrobras is probably going to collapse tomorrow morning or today. And I said, well, maybe, but I'll probably buy some more. And this is not advice. This is the way I see it. I could be wrong, but you got to make a decision sometimes. So the other one that I think is important, the other piece of news is related to Liz Truss and the Nord Stream pipelines. And there's this tweet yesterday from Kim.com. I think he's like a hacker, very famous hacker. And he said, how do the Russians know that the UK blew up Nord Stream pipelines in partnership with the US? And he says, because Liz Truss used her iPhone to send a message to Secretary Blinken saying, it's done, a minute after the pipeline blew up and before anybody else knew. iCloud admin access rocks. Do I believe Kim.com? I don't know where he gets his information from. I don't know if this is true, but if it is, I think it's a very serious thing, not just for Liz Truss, but for the credibility of the UK as an ally to any country, really. So there you go. Back to the currencies. Yes, when I worked in the city before 2012, I started a blog called forsoundmoney.com, which I don't have anymore. I think I started it out in 2006, and I used to write on that blog about sound money, and it was a lonely topic back then because people didn't really look into that kind of stuff. But I wrote a couple of articles called Currencies, They're All Sinking Part 2. And Part 1, unfortunately, I couldn't find it again. Some people found it on the Backtrack website. But anyway, I found it on themarketoracle.co.uk. They've kept a lot of my articles there. And I wrote back in April 2007 already that Currencies, They're All Sinking Part 2. And I didn't even use the term fiat currencies because back then people didn't really even know what fiat currencies were like they do now. But all I was saying is that fiat currencies always go to zero. And historically, you can look back and they do. And I touched upon gold and silver, gold in different currencies. And this will just give you an idea of how over the fullness of time, gold is a very good store of value. So this is April 2007. This is what I said in this paragraph here. And I'll put a link to this article below in the description. Our latest calculations show that the dollar, the euro, the British pound, the Swiss franc, and the Japanese yen have continued to lose value against gold. Since we last wrote, the dollar price of gold has gone from 618 to 684 today, which is a gain of 10.68% for gold. And I wrote part 1 in 2006. Against the euro, gold has gone up from 472 euros to 502, a gain of 6.35%. Versus the British pound, gold is up to 342, and that's not 1,342, that's 342 versus 316 for a gain of 8.23%. The Swiss franc has lost 9.15%, as gold has risen from 754 to 823. And lastly, against the yen, we have seen gold rally from 73,000 yen to a present price of 81,000, or a debasement of 11.09% for the Japanese currency. So just to give you an idea, the yen price of gold now is almost 250,000, and you know all the other ones if you are in those particular countries. And I said, as can be seen, talk of death of the dollar is only partly true. We feel that it is more appropriate to talk of the demise of the fiat monetary system, and with it, the death of all currencies that make up the system. And what I mean by death is like the death of their purchasing power. Eventually, of course, they will disappear because all fiat currencies do. And I don't think anything has changed. Look at how much more debt we have now than we did in '07. This was even before the '08 crisis. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. And yeah, some of you make disparaging comments about gold and silver, and you've never actually bought gold and silver, so you don't really know how precious it is to hold silver coins or gold coins. And I think it's about also buying something that you like. It's not just about the fiat price. And hopefully this will give you an idea of what gold and silver have been doing. Silver has, I haven't done one for silver, an article like this, but it's done the same thing. Yes, it's spiked at 50 back in 2011, but it's still a lot higher than it was when I wrote this article. So with that, let's quickly look at the markets this morning. It's 8:30 a.m. London time. We are an hour back. We turned our clocks back over the weekend, so it might be a little later in the US, but until the 6th of November, it will be like this. That's when your clocks go back. So we've got spot gold down $7 at $1636.80. High's been 46. The low is right here. Again, we're continuing to see paper selling during London hours. We've got silver just below $19. And how can it be that the silver price is this low while the physical market is so tight and premiums are so high? Well, because as we've talked many times, these prices don't mean much. It's all a lot of paper. Yes, the bankers have a lot of paper to throw at the spot price. Yet silver trading around $19, down about 1.37%. Dow futures is down 145, 0.5%. The Nasdaq is down 0.75%, and the S&P is down 0.2%. To the currencies, sterling is down 0.5%, 115.63. The euro is down 0.5% as well at 99.19. And the dollar is up 0.5% versus the yen, 148.20. And as I said in that article from 2007, yeah, all fiat currencies, the dollar included, they're gonna die in terms of purchasing power. And yes, there are ups and downs versus real money, i.e. gold and silver, but over the long term, there's no other way to keep the system going but to inflate it. Right now, the Fed is just trying to like keep everyone in the inflation game by turning the thermostat down a little bit because it got a little too hot because of inflation. But I think they're gonna, they can't turn it off, because if they turn it off, the purpose of the central bank disappears. Anyway, the dollar is also up against the yuan, about 0.75% at 7.32. And let's see what the dollar is doing versus the ruble. Well, versus the ruble, dollar's up 1%, around 62. Very steady, the ruble. To the other fiat currencies, Aussie dollar is down a third, 63.89. The dollar is up a third versus the Canadian dollar, 136.52. And the Kiwi dollar is down 0.2 at 50.58. To the general commodities, WTI crude is down 1.2%, 86.35. Brent crude is down 1.2 as well, 92.62. High grade copper is down 1.5 at 336. And US nat gas is actually up 9% at 6.19. Let's check the Dutch nat gas futures. Well, that's down 6%, but it's trading around 130. I think we got down to 100 recently, so it's up 30% in the last week. I think one of the contracts traded negative, but yes, we're at 130. To finish off, we'll look at the bond markets. We've got the 10-year gilt yield, UK government bond yield, up 5 basis points at 355. The 30-year is up 7 at 364. And to the Treasury market, the 10-year yield is up 5 basis points at around 406. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share it far and wide. Think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And with that, I wish you all a great start to the week. Take care. Bye.